Hi everyone, we're back. Hi Jason.
It's been a while. It's been like a whole month.
I know because you were like in Peru, Inca Trail. Tell us about all the hiking that you did. How was your
Oh my
experience?
gosh. It was great. It was a good chance to be out there with nature. And like I think the Inca Trail is a good example of what happens when like people come in and like clean up. Because the Inca Trail is really regulated. You actually have to like hire a tour guide, go out with porters, and guess what? There's no trash. Because I guess beforehand people would just kind of go out for these multi-day hikes and they would just leave stuff everywhere. And over the last 20 years they've been able to clean it up and you really get to enjoy the majesty of the nature. So it was fantastic. um
Yeah. No,
and
it's good. It's
I am
great.
so Go ahead, sorry.
No, you can hear me, right? No, I was just gonna say no, that's
Yeah,
great
yeah.
because sometimes I look at the trash in our reservoirs here, just like walking down the trail, and I'm like, look at all this trash. We should be cleaning that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it was good. It's I think the other thing is, um it was definitely a long trip and it was a good chance to detach. And I think it's a reminder for entrepreneurs. Sometimes your brain gets to think when you're out of the hustle and bustle, and it was a good experience. So would recommend.
Mm.
I am glad I never have to do it again. So once in a lifetime
Really?
experience.
Why do you say that?
It was so
Is it
tiring. I'm too old to do this again. It's just what it is.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. Um, no, I think it's important, like, when we think about productivity, we think about, writing those emails and, like, being in front of the computer and, like, getting things done from our to-do list, but often when you actually are able to step aside, take a break, just get out of, like, the daily grind, is when inspiration happens and you get these insights, right? And you can, like, maybe zoom out and as a founder, as a leader, really focus on your vision and what's important to you. I
Yeah.
think, and I don't think we value that as much as we should.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
they, I forget who I was explaining it to before, but a lot about being a founder is figuring out what you should do, not like
Hmm.
doing a bunch of things. And a lot of times startups fall over because they have too much opportunity, and you got to be really strategic about the things that you do spend time on because it's so easy to
Hmm.
chase the next thing. We were just talking about
Yeah.
that a little earlier today on our
Yeah.
team meeting.
Mm.
So
Awesome.
so
Yeah.
so
So in the
what's
meantime,
yeah. Keep going. I was
while
like,
you
"What's
were
happened in the
away,
last month?" Yeah.
yeah, what's happened? No, we've um kept the machine going. We've been prepping up for the pilotathon, which is coming
Mm,
up for Houston Energy and Climate Startup Week, whatever you want to call it, in September. It's September 15th. And we realize a lot of people are going to be away in the summer. So we need to, get our ducks in a row and get everything in place before people leave for the break. So we've been having some really good conversations with corporates at this stage to get them on board to be on the judging panel. And so I do want to take a minute to just talk briefly about how the pilotathon is going to be set up
mm,
for anyone watching. The idea is that it's going to you're pitching, but you're not pitching your company as a founder or as a startup representative. You're pitching your pilot project, and that's something that we want people to get really good at because for hard tech in particular, you need pilots, and it's really hard to do pilots. We know that. But how can we help put a framework in place that makes startups get easily plugged into corporates and their facilities, in particular, right here in Houston? So you can apply to pitch. Go to www.pilotathon.com. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you will find some post on there too about that. Um, so you can apply, and then if you're a corporate, reach out to us because we are getting our selected few judges as our corporate partners come on board. We'll have 5 to 10 corporates, the likes of Chevron, Oxy, on board who will be judging, and then we'll be selecting 1 to 5 pilots that they think would be a strategic fit for them. And I know it's like thinking far ahead in advance to September, but I think if you are a startup not based out of Houston, you need to be thinking about this. It's a big week. This is the second time we're doing Climate Week in Houston. The first year was a great success, I would say. There was so much activity going on. We brought a lot of our companies down from Canada, and they really found it to be very valuable to see the talent, the resources, and the right decision makers in town and at these events that really would help them make progress on their goals and ambitions. So, for anyone who's trying to get in touch with industry here, wants to fundraise, wants to get their pilots, plan your trip. Mark the date, 16th of September.
Yeah, and I see Ingrid is here, and she's co-chairing, really leading the charge on that. And I totally am hearing you say September 16th, and I definitely sent an email last week saying September 9th because I'm brain dead, and I was thinking of my birthday. So
Is that September 9th, your
no,
birthday?
my it's December 9th, but it's just like in your head,
Okay.
there's so many
Okay.
numbers. It's
Yeah.
just,
Okay.
what can you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
And
that
yeah. In terms of what we did while you were gone, I don't know. I'll have to look at the calendar, but we did
well,
last week.
yeah, well, what I
Do the
guess
Yeah.
let's talk about, like,
Should we
what
talk about
happened in,
last
I
week?
guess, let's talk about
Yeah.
the ecosystem. Was there anything
Yeah.
kinda changing? I know, when I was set to go out, I think the tariffs on China were, like, set to go into effect, and, here today, I think I saw the news, tariffs are down from 145 down to 30% on China. I know, right? Like, what do we say? Sit tight and see. But I'm curious. Reflecting on that, there's obviously a lot of volatility, and we've been seeing like oil prices drop. When we're talking to partners out there, like, do you feel like that's affecting their like zeitgeist when they talk about supporting the ecosystem?
I think a little bit. I was also at OTC last week, and I
Mm,
heard, on the first day, like the opening ceremony, a lot of these leaders from big oil and gas companies were there, and they were very much saying, tariffs are going to be bad for the industry,
mhm,
because as much as we want to build things in America, a lot of even for that building, we're dependent on the global supply chain, and our world economy is optimized for efficiency, and you make things where it makes, business sense. And so putting tariffs in place really disrupt that. And the number I heard was like, we can expect a 17% increase in what everything's going to cost for the oil and gas industry. But obviously, we see everyone understood it's still like a um, sliding scale, I guess you would call it. Like it's still moving, right? Like the tariffs were 130% 2 days ago, and now they're down to 30%. Maybe they will go down. I don't think they'll go back up again. But I think it's also these business leaders have been very actively lobbying, talking to government officials, and letting them know, like, what are good ways of bringing industry back to the US that's not going to negatively impact, in particular, the oil and gas industry. Because, yes, we're going to make permitting easier, and there's like that drill, baby, drill agenda,
mm.
which is positive. But if the oil prices, like you're saying, are going to continue to decline, no one's going to be drilling.
Yeah. And I guess I think we've started to see we did see some of that effect, some venture financing. I know two of our members talked about how they were pitching, I think Saudi Aramco Energy Ventures, and kind of the feedback they got was things are on pause right now, because the price of oil doesn't kind of substantiate investing further, from a strategic perspective into like energy focused businesses. And Saudi Aramco has a very broad remit. So they invest in everything from efficiency improvement within oil field operations to strategic energy resources, like doing like lithium extraction and all the refining processes around brine. And this was affecting part of their portfolio where they said, we're not as keen to try and optimize efficiency because it's unclear, how that's going to affect your viability as a business, but also that's not going to be the big value driver if there's depressed prices for a while. And so the fund is $1 billion fund. Like they're not going to stop investing that, but it's just where they're spending their time is already seeing. We're seeing that shift already. Actually,
Yeah.
not just two of those businesses, probably four of them we're aware of who have been tied in and have been affected by some of the macro.
Yeah. And I think what I heard at OTC from the corporates was like not only in terms of like, their venture investments, but like their project investments, right? Even in terms of
Mm,
deploying big projects, making FID decisions, if they can push that out for more certainty, they would do that. And so everyone's holding cash, and that doesn't mean the cash goes away. It's just there for a better time.
yeah.
And so there is dry powder out there. People have um, assets that they want to deploy, but since the oil and gas companies are going to put a pause and hold on some of their projects, that means it's going to cascade further down to startups, because often, when you're testing new technology, um, getting these smaller businesses to come in for these big projects, if those projects are not going forward, then most likely startups are not going to get funded. And the same goes for the venture money and the funds that they have. Yes, the funds are there, but if the funds can wait for more certainty on where they should invest, they will,
Mm,
and that's just going to slow everything down. And a lot of
good.
these startups can't afford to wait.
Yeah. I want to show you guys something I was looking at, because I was doing some research for this program called Liftoff. We're starting today, and it has some other context. But there's this thing I've been hearing a lot about in the last, I don't know, 6 months, called the smiling curve. Have you ever heard of this before? Is this something you've heard of? Okay, so there's this like idea that uh, if where you are in a value chain like dictates how much money you can have or how much profit you can make. And basically the middle of the curve is like the place where you make the least amount of money. So it's called smiling curve because it goes up on the edges and you make the most money in the corners. And kind of the theory that was kind of put forward like 10 or 20 years ago was you make the most money if you have IP, right? If you do R&D, if you have a brand, if you design something that's novel, you can charge a premium for that. And then on the other side, you can get a premium if you're really good at marketing and really good at providing a service. And so what ends up happening is like the place in the middle where people don't make money is like manufacturing and importantly distribution. And like it's just commoditized. And then that's the theory. And then you go out and look at the data and you look at like where countries are in terms of where they produce stuff and where they tend to like have average wages, like it just shows up in like wage data. And you can see China is there at the bottom making the least amount of money, which is why we like to like have that stuff outsourced, because like we make all our money in the venture ecosystem by creating IP, by creating novel technology. Or if you're doing software as a service and SaaS, you're out there saying I'm going to provide and market the heck out of something so I can pick up all the customers and I get all the margins if I'm on both sides. There's no margin of making stuff in the middle. And it's unclear if there's actually like value. What I'm getting at is it's unclear if there's value reshoring it, because like just generally, yes, it's efficient to ship it out, but like there's a reason we push it out. The values in the technology development and maybe manufacturing unique pieces of technology, but also a ton of the value is just like figuring out how to sell stuff better, figuring out how to
Mm-hmm.
market to that niche customer. And that's something we teach founders, right? Develop your IP portfolio, figure out your niche where you can charge really high and get a lot of value. And so where I'm going with this is like coming back and saying we want to reshore manufacturing, kind of, maybe it's the way things were 50 years ago, but like, is that valuable? That I think that's
Mm.
the question. And I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves is like, what do we want to bring back? Right. And I think that was a
Yeah.
conversation you guys had with Mush 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, right? Tell me about that. I
Yeah,
didn't get a chance to
absolutely.
listen.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
so much fun. It should be out
Yeah.
tomorrow, actually.
Okay.
Our conversation with Mush Khan and Jan Odegaard came on board as Jason was away, and we spoke about reshoring, and it was just, I mean, such a good conversation. And this is exactly what we spoke about, is that there's a reason why they were outsourced, these technologies, because I mean I worked for an EPC, Aker Solutions in Norway, and traditionally we used to construct our own like control systems, right? Everything was manufactured either in the UK or in the office in Houston. But then over time we just stopped doing it, and what we really became was an assembly. Like we
Mhm.
just assembled things and we got parts from different, and that's what we were actually doing. That was like the construction was like assembling different parts together into one product. And it just, the market dynamics drove us to moving production somewhere else so that we could focus on, as advanced economies are really good at, is selling that product, having it fit, designing it, engineering it, but then getting it actually manufactured somewhere else.
Yeah, it's that right side of the
Mhm.
curve that you were sitting in, where it's just the
But
highest value was you when you're right next to the customer and assembling what the customer needed,
yeah,
right?
and it was like a
Yeah.
very strategic decision from the top leadership. Also, was like, that's not where we're going to also make margins. That's
Mm.
not where we're going to be profitable. So we're going to actually sell everything that we have to actually make, and completely move away from it. So these are like strategic decisions that companies have made to optimize for profitability, for margins, right? Like you're saying, because of that smile curve.
Mhm.
What do you call it? The smile curve?
Smiling curve, yeah.
The smiling curve. Yeah,
Yeah.
because of that curve. So absolutely. And also just thinking about, okay, what are the things that we do bring in-house that are critical for us to have in-house? On Friday, we had Ali from Equinor. She's a VP of
Mhm.
US Lithium, come and present to us at the Determined to Lead lunch. And, she spoke about this. She said, like, all lithium batteries are currently being manufactured in China. Like, she showed a curve and it was all like China everywhere. And we do want to diversify that, like, which is why Europe is trying so hard. The US wants to also start manufacturing batteries here, because if the future is going to be EVs, we want some control in that supply chain to not be dependent on another country for a very valuable part of transportation, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think the important thing she showed was not all the rare earth metal supplies are in China. Like they're all over the world. It's just it was very clear China had like 95% of the capacity for refining and turning that raw material into batteries.
Mm,
And that was what was stark about that chart, right? And so it's
mm,
uh, there is an opportunity to upgrade your supply chain still because the
mm,
critical raw resource is still available, right?
mm, yeah. So I think actually it was such a good conversation, and we think it's so relevant. We're actually going to launch within our energy tech startups a series focused on that,
Mm.
bringing in Jan and Mush to come and interview some more people and really try to understand how are we going to reshore, and what are we going to reshore that makes sense.
Good. That should be
Mm,
fantastic. We'll look forward to hearing from them. It sounded like it was fun.
yeah.
I can't wait to hear the episode. You said it's coming out tomorrow?
Yeah, it's coming out tomorrow. Yeah. And then
Good.
while you were gone, we also did, talking about determined to lead, we also, end of April, collaborated with Rice University and their undergraduate venture Girls in VC group. And we took our determined to lead at Rice at Lilly Lab and had our women in VC session there. Amazing, amazing discussions, amazing turnout. Um, and just with that, and also followed up with our event at the Ion last week with Ali from Equinor. It just shows how much there's a need to create that platform and get great speakers out talking about the energy transition, um, and that people are finding it valuable.
Yeah. What was something
Hmm.
surprising you learned at the investor event?
Something surprising.
Yeah,
Such a
I'm
good
interviewing you
question.
now.
Such a good question. And it seems so long ago now. But I think what was interesting is that we had women on stage. We had Mitra Miller, who's with
Mm,
president of Han. We had Sandy Guitar, who's been running a fund, very experienced investor. Then we had Gretel on there, who's newly just joined,
mm,
coming in from PE, Han, and just showing that regardless of the background that you had, I think someone mentioned that they, you know, like had a very different background in terms of their undergrad was like very liberal science, like music or arts or something. And then I think it was Sandy. And now, she's probably one of the most known female investors and investors in general in Houston. So it doesn't really matter what background you come from.
mhm.
You can enter this the industry and provide value based on like your particular background. So Gretel, for example, has a very operational background coming from SLB that allowed her to get her position within PE, and then now transitioning into how can she help smaller companies. Um, and yeah, so what was surprising is as much as like Houston is not known for the investor community for startups in general, um, that we have gotten lots of experienced investors over the years that we can learn from, grow from, and that we need to keep growing that ecosystem
Yeah.
to build an overall ecosystem that supports founders and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so I went to this GHP digital committee, and it's a group that comes together who want to support the Houston ecosystem, and they had done I guess, a survey of like where to spend time, and the topic that came up was activating early stage capital, and I think inevitably every 10 years that always comes up as a topic, but it made me think a little bit. 10 years ago, like we would be jealous for the amount of capital we have today in Houston between like an expanded Houston Angel Network. We have Swan here now, and then we have all the different programs kind of injecting early stage capital. And it made me realize like there's a little bit of a pendulum. As capital becomes available, you have more entrepreneurs starting company, they demand more capital, and then you suddenly have a shortage of availability. And we do have a lot of these folks coming in at different stages of their career, contributing to the capital scene, and kind of more demand begets more demand in a good way. So it is good to think back about where things were 10, 15 years ago, when I think the only game in town was like Mercury, and a much smaller Houston Angel Network, and so we're in a good place. And it's always good to look back and say, how do we activate more? I think one of the other like resources I wanted to bring up that is coming online that's going to help out our early stage ecosystem is our friends over at First Bite Ventures started up BioWell. It's this facility that's a biotechnology pilot plant where they're going to take a bunch of bioreactors. I think they actually acquired for free the bioreactors from Cemvita factory to like anchor their facility. And this is where you might want to take, a bio component where maybe you're producing it in like milliliter content and you want to produce it in gallon or liters and gallons. You'll go into one of these reactors as a next step before you go up to like barrel size production. And they're out in, let me see if I remember the town, Richmond, Texas, which is inside Houston, I promise. But I think it's like an hour or so away from downtown. But that's a kind of resource we didn't have. Even at J&J Labs, they don't have the ability to kind of do this scale up production, which is just really valuable when you're trying to like tune your recipe for production. It's not capital, but it reduces the capital required to really scale up a meaningful bio business here. And I think one of our members is going to be a client of theirs shortly. So it's definitely a valued resource, and we're glad to see them opening up. I think we're going to help organize a field trip maybe in the coming weeks to go check it out.
Mm. Yeah, awesome. Do we want to talk a little bit about the liftoff program that we're launching this week?
Yes, and we're going
Yeah.
to announce it and then say it's not available to anyone who hasn't applied already. So Liftoff is a program we're starting. We're taking a class about 20 to 30 founders in the early stage and teaching them some of the best practices we're collecting from individuals here in Houston who've raised capital before. So the tagline is learn how to raise your first $1 million. I would say it's a program that you want to take 6 months to a year before you start raising capital, because you want to lay the groundwork and kind of understand the theory of raising capital. Raising capital is kind of one of the hardest things you're going to do. It takes some skills to sell, it takes some skills to market, but you're selling something that's just very different. It's unique. It's equity in your company. You got to market to a group of people who I don't want to be marketed to, frankly. And you got to convince them to give you money today for some future value. And it's very challenging, but it's achievable. People raise money all the time. I think Nada, we were talking about this one founder raising gobs of money on LinkedIn. I mean, like, how are they able to do this? It's because they know what levers to pull, how to like go out and find that right investor who wants to invest in their deal, and it's a machine. Just like you have really great salespeople and really great business development people, when you kind of understand the dynamics and know how to go out and raise money, you can do it again. But it's a lot of work, and so what we're trying to
Mm.
teach people is kind of the skills, the strategies, hear from people who've done it, and understand kind of what comes together, and what will translate to a successful financing. And so we're running that for the first time starting today. And then maybe the most fun part of this is we're going to run a negotiation simulation at the end, where you have to negotiate a term sheet, and the prize is Monopoly money. So we are inviting investors and entrepreneurs who want to pretend to be investors to join that program, and help with the simulation. And I
Cool.
think
Yeah.
that will be June 27th. I'm trying to remember the last Monday in June. That's when we'll be doing the
Okay.
simulation. 23rd.
Oh, is
23rd.
it? Oh, 23rd. Okay, good. Because I was like, I'm not going to be here on the 27th or the 23rd.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly. Because
and
everyone
I
else is
remember,
taking 4th of July off after that. So we don't
yeah.
count the 30th as a day this year.
Pretty much, I think summer break starts earlier. Okay, great. No, I'm really excited about the program. We're at capacity now. We have founders who've signed up. So really excited to see the first iteration of this. And again, this is something that we will be offering every year, if not twice a year. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see.
Jason's like, don't commit me for twice a year, but
We'll see.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, mm.
Good.
No, I think it's good. I think what we're doing that's different here is really focusing on the hard tech aspect of it. We're not
Mm-hmm.
fundraising the way that you fundraise for a digital company. Of course, some of the companies that join will be digital too, which is fine. But I think there's that other element that we cater to, in particular at Energy Tech Nexus, where a lot of our startups are creating hardware.
Mm.
Um, and that's a different ball game. And I don't know, and I don't think we spoke about the Developer U coming down here, do we?
No.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they did their first of a kind workshop, which was very relevant to all the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah. And I think the other
Mm,
thing that's a little different is
mm,
this is a skills course. It is different from an accelerator where maybe you're taking a business and massaging it and injecting resources into it. Um, my assumption here is there's plenty of good businesses and good ideas, but if you don't wrap your head around kind of the fundraising process, um, A, you'll never get the company funded, but B, just like it's just a good skill for our community to have. And the more people who know how to fundraise, they can either do it for their current business or their next business. It'll kind of reduce friction in our ecosystem, for getting that capital deployed. So it's as much about helping the entrepreneur just get faster at raising capital.
mm, yeah. Um, and yeah, and then this time around, we've changed the timing of Thunderwatch from 9 a.m., which is what we used to do, to noon. We thought this might be a um, better time for us and for others to join in, and it's not like the rush of Monday morning. But when you're taking a lunch break, join us, ask us questions. Um, every Monday until at least end of June, we'll be doing this.
Mhm.
Um,
We
yeah,
may
and
have to change the name to Burger Watch so I can at least have some
burger.
lunch, while we're talking.
Yeah, bring your lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a little bit, Jason and I are a bit rusty today because we, took a month hiatus, but we're back. And we'll be back with more information on what's happening in Houston, what happened last week. What are we picking up on the street? Um, what can you look forward for? And then also zooming out a little bit and looking at the industry and what's going on. Anything else, Jason, that we
Yeah.
should mention?
Can you
Hmm.
We actually have, the field trip to Mars Materials. You got like half an hour to register if you wanna come out because the security is gonna close the, registration for that. So, not if you can, drop in the link for the Luma while I share what this is. So, Mars
Mhm.
Materials is one of our members. They have a technology they're developing, out at, I think it's the Shell Tech Center, out in West Hollow. So, they have an amazing facility out there where they like again can help with people developing new chemistries, catalysts, and technologies, and scale them up from like the milligram level of production to again leaders of batch production. And they literally have reactor bays set up within the Shell facility, and they basically are leasing that out or bringing in entrepreneurs to kind of use that skill set and that capability to scale up. And so I know Shell's been a fantastic partner. They've invited us in to take a group to go see the location and do a tour, see a little bit about what Mars is doing. I would encourage you to sign up. We did promise Shell Security we would send them a list of who is coming by 1 o'clock so they can do the security things. If you guys all know, when you go into a Shell facility, you must hold the railing when you go up the stairs, and must be very careful and wear the hard hats. So they take it very seriously for good reason, and they want to know who's coming so they can get security prepped for arrival. So we'll share that. Good.
Awesome.
It'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So that's on the 15th, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to put the link there, but I don't know on LinkedIn. But anyway, I'll do that after we're done with the call.
Okay.
Mm.
Good.
Good.
And then the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is, we did a similar field trip to Hearth Metals to see their low carbon steel production. I just saw in the news a few weeks ago that Electra raised a Series B, and they raised $186 million. So there is capital out there for low carbon steel, and I think Temasek led that round, but it looked like it was a big financing. A lot of different players in there. I'm sure it took 6 to 12 months to raise, but that's a big one. And I'll be honest, I look back and thought decarbonization in the U.S. was going to be dead with the current administration, and here I am proven wrong by people who spend more time investing than me, and they're doubling down on decarbonizing the steel industry. And I'm sure there are going to be other low carbon steel companies to follow. And then I also saw there was a company that got funded that is electrifying the rail system. And they're doing battery hybrid electric rails. They're called parallel systems. So hybridization is showing up in different places. And I think the key is, capital still being deployed. These are some bigger financings. I think that was a $90 million. So no, that was a $40 million round. I haven't seen as much activity on the early stage, but clearly, like, these Series B companies are still continuing to raise capital, and we're seeing a lot of financing activity in other industries along that are also capex intensive. A lot of therapeutics companies getting funded. Obviously, a lot of AI and data center companies. So I was personally worried that there would be a big, much bigger slowdown in venture financing, but it seems like it's still happening in places.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good.
That's good. Good to get that roundup and update.
Good. All right. Well, I think that's
Okay.
it. We'll come back for next week.
Yeah, we'll be here next week, and hope to see all of you back here.
All right. See you guys.